So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 64554633728. And I'm talking about another Joe Rogan episode with Daryl Davis. He's a musician who has made a somewhat of a career of converting or giving Klan members, Ku Klux Klan members, the opportunity to interact with him and to convert themselves, is what I think he said at one point, based on his answers or his responses to what they would tell him about why they believe what they believe. I've seen this information about Mr. Davis for quite a while now, for a number of years. I think it was on a TED Talk that I first saw him. And I'm surprised, like I would have mentioned, that Joe Rogan hadn't spoken to him before. I know this is directly up Joe Rogan's alley. I really hope that this gives people the opportunities to see the ways that racism can subtly affect people's minds and their perceptions about the way that the world is. Before I go too much into Mr. Davis, I remember Joe Rogan was talking to Colion Noir, and he was talking about the fact that, people care more about innocent kids being killed in school shootings and so on than they do about gangbangers who are killing each other. And one of the things I said, that Colin Noir found his reason dead. He came into full force when he explained to Joe Rogan that it's not a case where people are in inner cities who sell drugs. It's not as if they have a bloodthirst and they want to go out and kill other people. It's a lack of jobs. It's a lack of education because their schools don't give them an opportunity to. He was telling Joe Rogan about how lucky he was to be in a good school system, because schools are funded by property taxes, and property taxes in those areas are not going to be high because of racial discrimination in the past, because of redlining. So they wouldn't have enough money to focus on schools. And because of segregation in schools, again, it wouldn't have enough money again. And because of charter schools and a lot of white people sending their kids to charter schools rather than integrating them, that money doesn't exist to give a lot of black kids the education that they need in order to make something of themselves. So the easiest thing to fall back on is the stereotypical things that everybody expects them to do, like sell drugs. And when you're selling drugs, somebody can come in on your turf, as you would say, and then how do you defend yourself? How do you protect yourself against that? Then you end up with a gun, and then you have to defend yourself. So whereas people are concerned about innocence, these are the lucky innocence that people are concerned about. And I think that Daryl Davis kind of brought that home, in that when he was talking to Ku Klux Klan members, he was saying that they would look at the result, not the cause for why things are the way they are. The result is that a lot of black people are in jail. So they would say, you see, black people have this gene for violence. And he would say, okay, in one instance he was saying, well, I guess white people have a gene to be serial killers. And he asked the guy, name 3 black serial killers. And he named 8 white serial killers. And he said, here's what, I'll make it easy for you. And he gave him a name of 1 black serial killer. He said, now name 2 others. And the guy couldn't. And he said that, that seemed to be a point where the guy understood or started to understand that what he thought he knew was wrong. This was a KKK member. And, one of the things that Joe Rogan does in the podcast is he commends the guy for being who he is. But the guy couldn't help but be who he is because of the circumstances that happened in his life over which he had no control. I think there's an illusion of self-determination that we have. And, I'd hate to talk about something besides what was in the podcast, but there is an illusion of self-determination. But at the same time, when we give people and we say, well, you just do the things, or at least I haven't seen any research on it, but this is something that I heard, that when people are given an okay to say, well, your life was predetermined, things tend to get worse, that they kind of give up on all self-determination, however that might be. So yeah, I understand that, but at the same time, I think the reasons, Daryl Davis, apparently he grew up overseas in different locations because his father was in the embassy system, the ambassadorial system, and it's only when he came back for a brief period to the US, this part I didn't know, that he encountered people being violently racist towards him in a Cub Scout parade, or a parade in which he was a Cub Scout, and he didn't know that it was just him until some people came and they got him out of the way, out of the stuff that people were throwing at him, and they didn't tell him what was wrong. But at that point, when they came for him to protect him, he realized it was only him that the people were attacking. Later on, when his parents saw his cuts and his whatever injuries he had, they explained to him what racism was. And he said he didn't believe them. But when he saw what happened after Martin Luther King died, the riots and so on, then he realized that his parents were right and that this was true, that people could hate you based on not knowing you because they think they understand something about you. I think that, it reminds me of an episode that I saw about feral pigs. And you could see how people had some people, they showed a variety of people. They showed some people who killed the pigs by hunting them, people who trapped the pigs, people who poisoned them, stuff like that. And there was one lady they asked at the end of the short documentary about these feral pigs. They said, well, do you eat the pigs? And her position was, oh no, these pigs, they carry all of these diseases, and they're really, no, it's not something that you eat at all. Then they spoke to the guy who, I think, was it in a helicopter, or I think he trapped these pigs. And he said, yeah, of course, I eat them, they're fine. And I thought, and then there were a couple other people who said, yeah, definitely, we eat them. And I thought, wow, just because of the way that you think of this pig, you think of it like a rat. The same way that people think about rats, that they transmit diseases, etc., etc., and that's why they're gross and we can't eat them. But deer are different. I guess you can eat deer. And what else? I can't remember what else people are okay with eating. But bears. I think people have eaten bears. And maybe it's because, deer are herbivores and pigs will eat almost anything. But it's not like these pigs were, eating stuff that they found at a city dump. These are feral pigs that are attacking people's, their farms and eating the plants that are on farms and disrupting the farms. So it's not as if they are living in a sewer and, contracting all sorts of human parasites and whatever else. And yet that was the lady's view of the pigs. And it's funny that that's the same kind of view that people would have of other races without really examining what it is that they believe and realizing that no, it's not like that. So Mr. Davis was talking about how his first meeting with somebody in the Klan, well, not his very first meeting, a meeting with one of the higher-ups in the Klan that he wanted to talk to in order to write a book. His very first meeting with a Klansman was at a bar in a white bar, he said, where black people didn't really go to. And the guy apparently didn't even know that black people could play music as well as he played. The guy came up to him, put his hand on his shoulder, bought him a drink, and was like, that's the first time I've ever heard somebody play like Jerry Lee Lewis. And, Daryl Davis was like, how could you not know that black people like, Little Richard, and even, what's the blind guy's name? But people like Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, I mean, they didn't play in the same style as what's his name? As Little Richard, but these were people who played, fantastic music. So for this white person to be amazed at how he played, he even told the guy that he knew the person who he was talking about. He'd spoken to him, and the guy had said that is where, from black people, is where he learned to play. And the guy would not believe him. As it was, the guy eventually let Mr. Davis know that he was a KKK member. And at first, Daryl laughed until the guy produced an ID to show that he was a legitimate KKK member. And to me, it's amazing. Mr. Davis is who he is, and that's why he was able to do what he was able to do, whereas many black people would never be able to do that. We can't ignore his past and his, should I even say, comfort, because he spoke about when he was going to school outside of the U.S. In the embassy system, and he said, the classrooms were a mini United Nations. So he was comfortable with all sorts of people from all over the world, whereas the average black person or even the average white person is not in any way. They haven't had friends who looked very different from them. And he said that when he was in school in the U.S., when he finally came back, he was either in a black school or in an all-black school or an integrated school. So I guess he had never encountered the kind of, I guess it would have been a more integrated school than anything that started out integration at the time, whereby, a lot of the first people would have been really traumatized. As far as I remember, there's a video of black students going into a white school and having to be, escorted through a mob of people who were hurling insults at them. And I remember one of the black students who had encountered that, I think it was at a university, she was traumatized for life. So, but Daryl Davis, having had that experience, much like Barack Obama, I don't know that any other black person, what Barack Obama said was that when he looked at white people, he saw people who looked like his grandparents. And I can't imagine, how it must feel for him to be in that sort of, in between world where he can look at himself and know that people would be afraid of him, but the very people who would be afraid of him, when he looks at them, he's not afraid of them, because the people that brought him up, that loved him, that cared for him, looked like that. Anyway, at the end of it, Joe Rogan was asking Mr. Davis what could be done to change the situation. And Mr. Davis seemed to think that it could be the schools. He mentioned how at first sex education was this taboo thing, but now it is perfectly normal in schools, and people have gone beyond whatever reservations and resistance that they had at first. But I don't think sex education is the same thing as racism. As he rightly pointed out, pastors and rabbis and so on, they can't preach togetherness to adults. In the Sunday schools or to the little ones, they'll teach, yeah, we're all alike. God made us all the same, maybe. I don't know. But once you become an adult, you can't preach that sort of thing, that, hey, if you're a Jew, it's okay to marry a Catholic. If you're a Catholic, it's okay to marry a Jewish person. If you're Protestant, it's okay to marry a Muslim person. You can't preach that, because people would leave your congregation and you wouldn't make money. But I think it's worse than that when it comes to racism, because when it comes to racism, I have heard of people who would actually take on the school board when they heard of this liberal nonsense that their kids were learning in schools. For example, in the south of America, Southern America, people have taken on the school boards, and the school boards have backed down when it came to the curriculum that changed to accurately, may I say, portray the America's past. People did not want to hear that their kids were learning about the truth. They just preferred the way that things were. So I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as easy. And I think that even Joe Rogan is so mistaken about how things have changed. I think he was saying that, racism has gradually improved, and not as fast as we'd like, but it's been improving. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there are a lot of people who will appear to be fine people, but if they see you, if they see someone that they don't, they're afraid of, a minority in the street, they'll cross the street. No matter how liberal they might sound. I remember, Cenk Uygur from TYT? I think he was mentioning that he'd had a conversation with somebody who was very liberal, and then he'd asked them, well, why, if you saw a black person at night, would you cross the street? And they said, yeah. And they said it caused them a lot of cognitive dissonance to understand why they would do that. And then they blamed the liberal media, but I don't think, not the liberal media, they blamed local news. But I don't think it's local news. I think it's pervasive. I think it's everywhere. I think it's the things that you think aren't, things that you think aren't in any way racist, where, gang members are shooting each other. Who needs to sympathize with that? That is racist, and people don't even realize it. Or they think, there's higher crime in these areas. There is, and there isn't. What there is a lack of proper policing, where the people in a particular area do not trust the cops, and with good reason, because when you check, as Daryl Davis would have revealed, a Baltimore cop, while he was a cop, was arrested, and I think the way Mr. Davis was saying it was kind of confusing, because he was saying that this cop was arrested, convicted for planning a bombing of a synagogue, and then subsequently he had another problem with respect to assaulting some black men, and then he was forced to retire from the police force. If what he is saying is true, that is crazy, because this guy spent time in jail for planning to bomb a synagogue, and then he was still on a police force. But anyway, yeah, it might even be that the police forces in these areas are more corrupt. Not that the areas are corrupt, but that the police are corrupt, and that they're not doing their jobs. Anyway, guys, wish me lucks. So you can like or unlike, you can comment, subscribe, and or share. Peace.